Hello, everyone, and welcome to Functional Fertility, the podcast designed to demystify your hormones, up-level your lifestyle, and supercharge your fertility potential. I'm your host, Dr. Kalia Waddles, and today's episode is all about embracing our wholeness for optimal fertility and a healthy life, with our amazing guest, Carrie Levine. Carrie is the founder of Whole Woman Health and the author of Whole Woman Health, a guide to creating wellness for any age and stage. She treats most common women's health concerns, incorporating gynecology and functional medicine. I've had the pleasure of connecting with Carrie over the last several years, and I'm so happy to bring her wealth of knowledge to the show. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you, Kalia. Thank you for having me.
You and I actually got to spend some time together at a conference last summer in real life, and I've been watching your work and have a copy of your book and just admire your work so much. And as a fellow IFM certified practitioner, I know that you bring functional medicine to life in the clinic, and I thought it would be helpful today for you to share from your perspective how functional medicine is actually so uniquely well suited to support women's health and actually fertility specifically.
Well, you would be the best person to speak to that, being the maven that you are, and my go-to for women who are having challenges. It's right. Any particular health issue, including fertility, can be multifactorial and has components that are physiologic and may have components that are related to emotional things as well. And women are best served by addressing all of the possible causes for what's going on. And when all of the possible causes are addressed, I think better health is attained overall, including fertility goals.
I have this conversation all the time with people, especially those who have been diagnosed with unexplained infertility, which is so frustrating, that we often have to look outside the reproductive axis to figure out what's going on. Because you've probably had the ultrasound, you've probably had some kind of preliminary hormone testing. We got to think outside the box. And I love the functional medicine operating system and how it allows us to systematically take a look at all these other body systems, right? That's the beauty of this approach. So you've treated women for years who have unexplained infertility, or maybe explained infertility. In your practice and in your experience, what are some of the most common causes that you've seen?
I think that the number one cause is undiagnosed, quote unquote, celiac fertility. And I don't think that it necessarily has to be celiac. I think it can just be a gluten sensitivity or a gluten-driven infertility, where that kind of inflammation that perfuses throughout the entire body in the presence of that kind of situation seems to be a piece of the pie. And when that piece is addressed, things shift. Not always, as you know, but often. I would say that's the most common. Second runner-up, I think probably I would say just generalized hormone imbalance, and compounded by stress, compounded by the HPA access, and nobody explaining that to women, the interplay between stress and hormone balance, and that is physiologic and real. It's not like, yeah, my life is stressful. Everybody's life is stressful, which is true. But as you well know, the molecular effect is real and can be a hurdle that can be overcome. But women need to understand, and in a conventional medical model, that conversation around hormone balance and stress, the integral relationship between those two things is not discussed.
Okay, we have to dive into this a little bit, because I know people listening are like, oh gosh, this hasn't been investigated for me yet. I think that's probably true for a lot of people who are listening. So going back to the celiac disease, are you screening only those who have GI symptoms, or should we screen in a more broader way to catch people who maybe aren't noticing symptoms but have some autoimmunity going on?
Right? I mean, that's like, of course, like, heck no. Heck no, not just GI symptoms. Unexplained infertility, top of the list, along with eczema, psoriasis, depression, gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation. Did I say depression? Depression, fatigue, right? The whole laundry list of things. And because, as you well know, that mechanism of inflammation and that mechanism of autoimmune disease can manifest in a whole variety of ways that don't necessarily, it's not necessarily a direct or obvious correlation. And I find, and maybe you find this too in your practice, like helping people understand the centrality of gut health to a whole myriad of symptoms is like mind blowing for women. They'll come in and they'll say, my joints ache or my muscles ache or I'm super fatigued. And I'm like, I think that has something to do with your gut. And it is mind blowing because it is such a different way of thinking about joint pain and muscle pain and
Yeah.
fertility.
That was a point well made that oftentimes the symptoms, the signs and symptoms of celiac disease, they're extra intestinal. They are outside the GI tract. And so if we rely on those GI symptoms alone, we might miss it. It's so funny you're saying that. I just had a call with the patient yesterday, and she is having trouble conceiving a third baby after having two children. And I said, okay, well, what were you doing? What was going on in your life when you got pregnant with your last baby really easily? And she's like, oh, now that you mention it, I had gone off gluten for the 3 or 6 months before I got pregnant. But then I didn't really feel any different. So then I ate gluten again. But now that you mention it, I'm kind of recognizing that. I thought, okay, let's talk about that.
Now we have really something to work with.
These historical pieces, they're helpful. Okay,
They
so
are
that's
helpful.
gives us something to chew on here in terms of talking to our healthcare providers about doing some celiac screening if we have this diagnosis of unexplained infertility. And then you mentioned the HPA axis. And if that term or that concept is not familiar to any listeners, will you just tell us what that means?
Sure. It stands for hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. And some people will take it a couple more steps. Gonadal, which in women are the ovaries, in the men, it's the testes, axis. And it's the interconnectedness of these aspects of our body and that they're on the same loop. And so when one organ system is affected, all of the organ systems are affected. So, for example, if someone is having super high levels of stress, it's not uncommon for women to be like, yeah, I skipped my period. Like I had final exams and then I skipped my period. And that's not a coincidence. That has to do with the interrelationship between these organ systems. And so in the same way that there can be an interruption in any one of those organs and the whole system can be affected, you can support any one of those organs and the whole system will be supported. I always think of Joel Evans, who is, as you know, on the teaching faculty for IFM, and he was teaching on the hormone module when I took it a very long time ago. And he was like, adrenals, so this is the hormone module. And he's like, adrenals, 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 adrenals. And I'm pretty sure he said he doesn't really talk to women about hormone support until they've addressed their adrenals. And in my head, I was like, yeah, that's because you're a guy and you don't take care of women all day. You don't actually know the realities that not everybody can change their life. Not everybody can do what they need to do to get their adrenals restored so that they can have hormone balance. But point taken, right? Which is adrenal support is tremendous and a fabulous backdoor into hormone support.
I'm so glad you brought up these challenges to our HPA axis and how that can knock us off our trajectory a little bit, and I'm just thinking about final exams. You mentioned final exams. My period would always get messed up if I had final exams, particularly like if I had it before I ovulated, then my ovulation would be late. My period would come later. I moved once when I travel across time zones. Like there's a whole variety of factors that might influence when you ovulate and therefore when your period happens.
Totally. For me, it was much more physical stress, doing a lot of things outside that were physically active, backpacking and climbing and those kinds of things. And those were the things where I saw the direct correlation. And whether that was physical exertion and activity or the change of lifestyle of, camping and cooking over a stove, those kinds of things, any of those changes can affect our systems, even if it's a positive stress, right? There's that aspect too. Not all stress is negative per se. It could be getting married. It could be a job that you've always wanted. It could be writing a book or launching a podcast. Like even the positive things can affect our adrenals and therefore our hormone balance.
So if anyone is listening and they are wondering, how do I know if something is going on in my HPA axis? Will you talk us through what that might, two parts, I think. Number one, what that might look like in a human body, like what's your persona of an HPA axis dysfunction? And then number two, are we going to do some testing?
So, I mean, how many women walk into a practitioner's office and say, I'm tired? Right?
All
Many.
of them. All of
Yes.
us.
Yes. Yes. So that's a good red flag if you feel tired. If you have a really tough time getting up in the morning, that could be a sign that your cortisol levels are low. If you are awake at 3 a.m., that could be a really good sign that your HPA axis or your cortisol secretion is sort of reverse what it's supposed to be, which is high in the morning. So we have our get up and go and can get out of bed, and low at night so that we can sleep. So sleep disruptions, absolutely, I think are a reasonable telltale sign that something in the adrenals might be going on. And I think this is, I feel like, one of the sweetest little juicy pearls of trying to get a handle on your adrenals, which is, how do you feel after you work out? If you feel like you need to take a 4-hour nap, either A, you're under fueling your workout, so there's that, or B, your adrenals may not have the reserves that they need to be able to support an intense workout. And I think about, and I often share this example with patients in the clinic. I think about when I was having my kids and they were little and I was delivering babies at the time. So I was like on 50% call in a small community hospital. Nonetheless, I was, nursing my babies, delivering babies, talk about erratic sleep. It was all over the place. And I will never forget. I don't know how long after the birth of my first kid it was, but I went to the Y and I went to an aerobics class and I was so excited to finally be moving my body. And I got home from that. I like put him in Y care. I was like, I'm doing it. I'm doing all the things. And we got home and I slept for 4 hours. And I thought to myself, I didn't know then what I know now. And when I look back on myself and I look at that, I'm like, sister, that was adrenal fatigue. And it took me 2 years. And I tell women this, right? It took me 2 years before I was no longer structuring every weekend around taking a nap. Before I was like, all right, it's the weekend. What are we doing? Not, this is when I'm napping, when the baby naps, and everything else is happening around that. So that post-exercise fatigue, I feel like, can be super helpful. And then maybe the last thing I'll throw out there is that midsection weight gain, right? That central weight gain that is our insulin meter, because when our cortisol is high, our insulin is high, and that will concentrate our weight gain to our midsection.
Mm-hmm. That is a stunning example, and I think very, very much displays this typical persona of just being so depleted. The demographic that is coming to mind is all my patients who they have a baby now maybe baby is maybe 2 or 3 or 4, and they want another baby, and it's not happening as quickly as their first conception. And I'll say, how often is your little one calling for you in the night? And they're like, I'm getting up 4 times a night with my child who's calling me or crawling into bed with me. And it's like, okay, well, that's probably different from what happened before. And there's probably some amount of adrenal stress happening.
Totally. And that's with or without still breastfeeding, right?
Yeah.
Because there's that element as well on nutrient demands, on sleep demands, on hormone balance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, will you talk to us a little bit about testing our adrenal function?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I more and more, because of the bulk of the population that I see, I do Dutch testing. I don't know if you do that in your world or not, but what I love about the Dutch test is it gives me a beautiful, comprehensive picture of most of the hormones I'm interested in. Not all of them. I'm usually doing a few conventional labs as well. And what I love is not only does it give me a comprehensive hormone picture, but it also gives me the cortisol and the DHEA. So it will give me a snapshot of both at the same time. The alternative would be to do just a saliva adrenal test to see. And the thing about that kind of testing is, in my opinion, women know. We know when we're tired, and we know when we're up at night for no particular reason, right? It's different when there's littles in the house, but when we're up at 3 a.m. for no apparent reason and we're twiddling our thumbs and we are restless, it's like we can test, but it's also a nice place to possibly save a few bucks and just go on clinical symptoms. Either way, some women really like data. I'm open.
Yeah, I'm open. I like that strategy. But I also think I appreciate that you're recognizing this inherent wisdom of, I know that I have to absolutely drag myself out of bed in the morning. And then I lay in bed at night and I'm wired but tired. And I so desperately want to go to sleep, but I'm really overstimulated. Like, we know our body.
And how about 4 o'clock, right? That witching hour, if there are other children at home and you're fatigued, and it's like either it's after school or after daycare, and it's pickup and it's mealtime, and cortisol plummets, and it is like, right, this is classic, as I'm sure you know, right? It's like the kids are screaming, the meal is trying to be prepared, somebody is watching the news or listening to the radio, and the central nervous system is losing it, literally, like physiologically, because it is too much stimulation for what the body has in physiologic reserve.
Yep. Over here thinking about myself. Kids get home from school, portal messages start rolling in because everybody else is getting home from work. I am absolutely sweating trying to get all of this stuff done. Yeah. Mhm. We see
So
ourselves in this.
yeah, totally. Right. And that's the moment to be like, okay, what can I do? I can do one thing at a time. I can turn off the background noise, the music, the radio. I cannot answer my phone. I can choose a really simple dinner so that I can sit down and breathe or tend to the kid who needs attending. I can step outside with all of the children and be like, we're going to take 3 deep breaths right now. Everybody in and out. Roar like a lion when you're done. Like there's a million things we can do, but the irony of the situation is it's hard to think straight in those moments. It's just hard.
It really is. I have a whiteboard here in my office, and for the longest time, I should actually put this back up. My whiteboard said, I give myself permission to do one thing at a time.
It's the biggest luxury, is it not? To do one thing at a time, to like sit here and only be talking to each other and not be checking the phone and checking the portal messages. It is the biggest luxury. Like that is the good day. That is the good day for me, right? It doesn't even matter what I'm doing. I could be vacuuming. And if that's all I have to do, if I'm not also trying to listen to a podcast, right, while I'm doing it, I am happy. If all I'm doing is cooking dinner, I am happy. It is the biggest luxury. So I love that. And yes, you could also get a tattoo and put it on your arm so that you have it with you all the time.
You know what, Carrie? I might need that. I might need that tattoo. So stay tuned. I'll post on Instagram if I get this tattoo.
Yeah.
The reminder is needed. And the last thing I'll say, because I have so many other questions for you, but you're just really making me think of, I know I'm not the only one who feels like this, especially if we're kind of this like type A personality or a go-getter. Like we get things done. It's really easy to always feel this sense of urgency no matter what we're doing, whether that is real or perceived. We have this sense of urgency. And I've seen that apply to our fertility journey as well. Like I just want to get this done as fast as possible, and we have to have this conversation about slowing down and surrendering and maybe even making a minimum 3-month investment in getting our not just our fertility, but our whole health in order, because really that's how we're going to maximize outcomes. So it's an investment, and it actually is an active part of our journey. We're not just sitting there waiting for something to happen. We're actively participating. So all of that to say, I think that there's really something to this, giving ourselves permission to slow down and take the time that we need, no matter what our goal is.
Well, I love what you just said, in that fear or stress can be real or perceived, right? Like the body doesn't differentiate. So the journey in and of itself, right? The journey of unexplained infertility, or whatever language is used around that perception, I can't have a baby or I can't make a baby, without necessarily knowing definitively that that is true, that in and of itself, the journey in and of itself becomes its own stressor. And I would think has to be leveraged against, right? With the quieting, with the slowing down, with the possibility of stillness, with the drawing into the present moment, right? Because that is part of it, right? It's like this super future oriented thing. And so, like, energy wise or energetically, we're always in front of ourselves, I would imagine. And so challenged to be right here, right now, with what is happening right now, right? It's like that Brene Brown moment of like, is it true? Do I know it to be true? Is it 100%? How do I know? What if I flip it around? Right. And that practice, I think, can be helpful when we feel our energy is like 9 months, 10 months down the road, 12 months down the road, hoping, wishing, praying, all the things, right? It's just like bringing it back to ourselves, to the here and the now, and what is known to be true for here and now. It is the ultimate practice. I mean, I'm not like, this is not easy stuff we're talking about. This is the crux. This is the hardest part, I think, anyway.
It is the hardest part. And along that note of trying to figure out what is real and what is true, I think a lot of patients come to me having been their nervous system having been quite activated by the medical system, actually, and feeling a lot of distrust and pain, maybe even abandonment. I mean, all kinds of emotions are coming up that are very draining to the nervous system. And I'm hoping that you'll bring us some insight from your years supporting women and give us some advice about um, or advice for those who they really want to have a baby and they're really invested in doing what's right, but maybe are hesitant or scared to participate in the medical system because they've kind of been traumatized.
Not kinda, right?
Very. Yeah.
Many, very, very, very real. Like, let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
I think for most women, or many women who go through the conventional medical system, because you walk in so so vulnerable. And I don't know what the system is like around you, but around me, it's just like the system has this incredibly impersonal, insensitive, mechanistic. First you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And if this happens, you go left. And if this happens, you go right. And there's no personalization, no tending to the individual, no tending to the emotional body, even very little tending to the physical body beyond procedure. And that is, you take a woman who is, her heart is on her sleeve, and you pump her through that kind of process, it is hard to come out intact, which isn't to say women don't. I am always awestruck and in such deep admiration of those women who are like, yeah, I did IVF, I got my baby. I'm like, go you. I don't know that I could have come through that and felt like an intact human being. So anyway, you know, I'm sure you experience this as well, right? When you can offer time-intensive care, that in and of itself, people's nervous systems just, when you listen to a woman and her story and her journey, that in and of itself is medicine. Forget about the outcome, right? Talking about just healing a heart, a broken heart, or a vulnerable, fragile heart. Just being present, just giving your full attention and not having one foot out the door is medicine. Let alone listening to the whole saga is medicine. Let alone diving in, right? A deep inquiry as we do. How are you sleeping? How are you eating? How are you moving? What's the quality of your relationship with your partner? Do you feel traumatized? Do you feel well? Do you like your work? Do you get fresh air? And yeah, tell me the clinical history and the trajectory of everything you've tried and all the people you've seen and all the rest of it. So my hope is that there's healing in addition to whatever the desired outcome is. And I love to be a part of that. And I feel honored to be a part of that. And I feel grateful to be a part of that, for just a woman to be like, I just feel heard. And that feels so good. Like, that's so great. So when I work with women, and I don't do a ton of focused, I don't do the focus like you do, at least as I understand you to do based on our conversations and exposure. When a woman's done everything that I have to offer, I send her your way. And then if that doesn't work for a variety of reasons, and she's like, I want to have a baby, I took care of a woman who was considering embarking on the medical system, right? Oh, we didn't even talk to the financial piece of that system. There's that. And this woman said, I found a clinic in, and I can't remember which specific country, and I actually looked this up last week when I thought we were having a conversation so that I would have the name of the clinic. But she went to Norway. I'm pretty sure she went to Norway. And she ended up going to Norway, and she had a baby. And she came back. I was like, you have to come back and see me and tell me about your experience, because women need to know this is an option. And this was a bunch of years ago, so I don't know that the money is the same, but she, for $10,000, went to Norway, where fertility treatment is a right, not a privilege. I think it's covered for all women. I don't remember the details of that. Maybe you know. Do you know the policy? It's covered. It's covered. It's not $80,000, right? And so the whole approach is different, right? It's a right, not a privilege, to have a baby in that country. And it's not available to only people who can afford it. And the clinic, this woman told me, was mostly women her contemporary. So there was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of comfort in that. So she went for 2 weeks. She needed to be there for 2 weeks. There were a whole host of medications she needed to take beforehand. They did egg retrieval, in vitro, implantation. And they also preserve, I want to say, up to 4 embryos. And she said, they only say 4 because they save the 4 best. Because why save the rest of them? Which I think is also like an interesting values shift. And most of what she described was that the process was sensitive and humane and kind. So when women are hitting the wall and or they don't have extensive resources and we're not able to get at it through functional medicine, I share this woman's name because she's like, share my name. I'm on Instagram, tell her to find me. And I have had other women go and talk to this old patient and go, and some have gotten pregnant and some have not. I'm not presenting a like, here's the magic solution 100% of the time, but it's such an option, right? It's financially so much more viable than what's happening in this country. And it sounds so much more humane. That's like a win-win right there. So I can get the name of it, Kalia. I can get the name of it and send it to you. There's more than one, and you can put it in show notes or something.
Yep, I'll put it in the show notes. And what you made me think of is sometimes people will ask, like, if I have a guarantee that they won't need IUI or IVF after they work with me. And I don't. I can't guarantee that. But I do feel confident that when we implement the functional medicine model and we build resiliency in your body systems, I really believe the outcome is going to be better, whatever path you choose, because your body is just more, your brain and your ovaries are talking more smoothly, and your metabolic health is strong, and your inflammation is low, and all of these factors that influence success, we have accounted for. We have controlled for the variables that we could.
Right. And it's about optimal health and wellness at every age and at each stage within what's possible for each of us, given all of the variables and all of the circumstances. And why wouldn't we want that anyway? Right? It's a win either way. Either way, you get yourself or you get yourself and a baby. Win-win.
Yes, you and I are so aligned in this philosophy about supporting our whole health for fertility and beyond. And one thing that you've said that I really thought about is that menopause is actually similar to pregnancy in that it can be demanding in our physical realm and our spirituality and our emotional health. So as we're thinking about, supporting our fertility now, but making sure that we have resilient health and longevity into the future, what are some upgrades that you think about that we can do in the preconception timeframe that are going to have the potential to support us now, but also when we're closer to menopause?
Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful question. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, I think that understanding the HPA access as soon as possible in our lives, which means starting with those young women who come in for their annual exams and talking to them about stress and hormone balance. Like, the sooner we can educate young women about that and we can integrate our understanding of that into the reality of our lifestyle, the better off we're going to be now and later. Because part of what happens midlife is it's a perfect storm. The ovarian hormone production starts to slow down. There's a preferential burden to the adrenals, and then the adrenals, which have been largely ignored, abused, or maltreated for most of our lives for one reason or another, are like, nope, not doing it. Not doing it. In fact, I'm taking you down. And so we can spare ourselves so much aggravation by really honoring the beauty and the intricacy of that HPA access. I think that's huge. I think all of the foundation work that we do in the matrix in terms of shoring up movement and shoring up nutrition, eating food that comes from the earth, limiting processed foods, limiting sugar, limiting alcohol, all of those things that you want to dial in preconceptually are going to ease your transition later in life as well. So making movement part of your lifestyle, making vegetables a central part of your nutrition intake, making rest and restoration part of what you do, along with, actualizing dreams and all of those things, but understanding that there is balance. And I don't mean 50-50 balance. I mean, there's physiologic homeostasis. And so it's okay to work hard. You also want to play hard too, right? And rest hard. So I think that foundation of the matrix that's the piece to dial in preconceptually that also serves midlife as well.
Mm, beautifully said. And I I think probably both of us are drawn to this work because that's what we would have wanted to know. Everything you just said is what I would have wanted to know before my kids were born so that I didn't feel depleted and that I had energy to show up as a parent, as a doctor, as a wife, as all these things, these roles that I aspire to. I want to show up and give that my all. And I wish I would have known what I know now. And that's why we do what we do, so that no one else has to feel like, oh, I wish I would have known.
It's so true, right? And that's part of the wisdom that we get to share in the incredible work that we get to do, right? Which is just like, don't do what I did. Like, it's a myth. You can't actually do it all at the same time, right? It's a
Thank
myth.
you for saying
It's
that.
a myth. And oh my gosh, how unwell was I? And how unwell are so many women who I see trying to do it all? It's not possible. I really wish I had understood that. I would have made some different choices, and mostly I would have been much kinder to myself. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I'll share a quick anecdote there just in case anybody needs a real world example that I've shared on this show before. In my second pregnancy, going into it, I was 28 years old. I was healthy. I had a nutrition degree. I knew how to eat. I knew how to take care of myself. But I was also in the third year of a doctorate program, had a toddler at home. I was interning. I was precepting. I was in clinic. I was probably working 60 hours per week. I developed pregnancy-induced hypertension, risked out of midwifery care. My whole birth plan changed, and the spiral occurred from there. And connecting with other women, with my mentors, and with um, our functional medicine, women's health community, and honestly, just with other women who went through this experience, has cultivated such healing and such an understanding that I was doing too much. And there's nothing that I can do about it now, but I can use that example to encourage others to take care of themselves and to look at that time frame a little bit differently and to understand how their preconception health actually does translate into their own health ongoing and the health of their children. And you want to set yourself up so you can enjoy this family you work so hard for.
Totally. And that's the whole idea around preconception care, right? Is to walk in as healthy as is possible.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't we want that either way? Like, we should want that either way. Kids can be so powerfully and so positively motivating. It's really beautiful in so many ways. We are driven to be the best that we can be for our kids. But why wouldn't we want that for ourselves anyway? Right? There's like a little socialization thing in there that's kind of problematic. Like, we should want that for ourselves because we are worthy. Now I think our kids can be wonderful mirrors and directly or indirectly encourage us to do hard things so that we can be the best that we can be, right? There's nothing like, I'm just going to use an example, like not being so psyched about what we see when we look in the mirror and having a little girl around who we then see looking in the mirror, talking to herself the same way. And you're like, oh my land. Okay. What am I doing? Like, I need to mop that up because I don't want my beautiful baby to feel that way, or my beautiful niece or my friend's daughter or any girl on earth, right? And so I'll back up and just say, want it for yourself, first and foremost. Want your best health for yourself, first and foremost.
I feel that. I feel that to my soul, Carrie. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and just bringing your perspective with such an authenticity. I really appreciate and admire that about you. And I want to encourage everyone to read your book, Whole Woman Health, where you walk through how all the nodes of the matrix, which if any listeners aren't familiar, I've talked about this as somewhat of a map of your body systems, and Carrie really details how to support each of those areas of your health so that you are your strongest and most resilient self for your own well-being. And I think that's such an amazing resource. So I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us and choosing us as a trusted source of information. To our show's producer, Paola Martini, so much gratitude. And Carrie, just from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you, Kalia.
See you next time, everyone. Did you love this episode and want to hear more? Head over to drkaliawattles.com/podcast, where you can find more episodes on all things fertility.